Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us for this informative webinar on waterline testing regulations and how the Stericyl Safe Water Solution can make compliance easy. My name is Shanda Chatham, and I'm the Director of Professional Education for Solmedics. I see we have many of you returning from last week's amazing webinar with RDH Michelle Strange, and several new names joining us as well. Welcome. We have a wonderful presenter tonight who brings vast knowledge and experience to share with us. I'm happy to introduce my friend and fabulous presenter, Cherie Busby from Heartland Dental. All right, say
Hi.
hello, Cherie. There we go.
I'm sorry.
So
I'm
excited to
happy to
have
be
you.
here, Bo. Thank you. Thanks for asking me.
Excellent. We are so excited. But before we get started, I'd like to just take a moment and share a little about Cherie and her 30 plus years of experience in dental. Cherie is credentialed as an expanded duty dental assistant, as a certified dental specialist in OSHA, is certified in dental infection prevention and control, and is the dental assistant training developer for Heartland Dental. So excited. Those are lots of good things there, Cherie.
Well, there is. I've been working hard to get all those things in there.
That's right.
But thanks. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, we have a lot of learning to get to. So we ask that you please place your questions in the questions panel. You'll see that little chat icon in the top right-hand corner of your screen with the question mark in it. And if you can, please be precise with your questions so that we can answer them correctly. Make sure you're really clear on what we're trying, the question that you're trying to ask. All right, and at the end of our session, we will answer as many questions as we have time for. The rest will be answered via email, so rest assured they will be answered. All right, Cherie, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I want you guys to think about this. Have you ever had a cup of water that you left partially full for a day or two? Did you notice that the cup was like kind of funky when you poured the water out? I'm talking like a little slimy, right? So I keep this cup in my bathroom for brushing my teeth. And yesterday, I forgot to take my morning medicine and I had left the water in that cup. Now, since the heat was on, it was kind of warm in the bathroom. And this morning, when I poured the water out, there was this slime inside my cup. So, yikes, right? That was just overnight in my bathroom. Now, can you imagine that slime is also building up in our dental unit water lines? Yikes again, right? The same thing in my husband's CPAP. Even though he uses distilled water, that biofilm still builds up. My little cup I can take to the kitchen and give it a good wash, unlike our water lines, right? So this is not a very scientific explanation, but I'm sure that you got the picture that I'm trying to portray here. So how does my little cup relate to dental water? Well, that slime that built up on my cup is the same thing that happens. Now, not everyone thinks that the water coming into the building is meeting the CDC recommendations of clean water that is less than 500 CFUs. But here's the deal. By the time that water enters the building, travels through the pipes, and then get to our dental units, it's already picking up the bacteria that's in those lines. And then it enters the small little blue lines that you can see in the diagram. This is the root for all the problems of the biofilm. Those lines inside of our units, they have the perfect storm for biofilm growth. It's small, it's dark, and it's warm. There are two kinds of harmful things that are in the water, and that comes to our units, right? The first one is the bacteria. Now, those are the things that float around in the water that sometimes you can even see. And it's kind of like if you ever put a powdered drink mix in a bottle and then you shake it up, but you didn't quite shake it up and you can see all it floating around in there. Those little floaters sometimes can be big so you can see them with the naked eye. Sometimes not, but they're still there. The second one is the kind that causes the most problem, and that's the biofilm. Biofilm is different in that it sticks and it's clingy to the inside of the water lines. This is the same way that the slime built up on my little cup. And although through the system, like the bacteria, it takes some hard work to dislodge, and because of its sticky factor, it continues to build up. And then you got a problem. Now, we all know not everyone is going to get sick, but if you go back to your bloodborne pathogens training, you'll know it takes that perfect storm of events for the rest of us, for that to happen, and for the rest of us just as gross, right? So, because it has been a problem, and why the recent outbreaks that we've had. So I know that everyone has heard of patients getting ill. It's been in the news all across the country. And some of these patients have even died from infections, and they were traced back to the dental office visit and the contaminated water lines. This is a real thing, people, and most of us think it's never going to happen to me or to my office. But I'm here to tell you today that it can happen. And the consequences of not following the CDC and your state guidelines, they can be detrimental, not only to your patients under your care, but also to the dental practice. This has become such a serious issue that the ADA has been educating dental communities on dental unit water line safety. It is so important. I found this great article that's in the RDH magazine it's November of 23, so it's a little old, but holy smoly, this was a great article, and I would encourage you guys to look it up and read it. And if you want more proof, that's the real thing right there. So the CDC, OSHA, and the EPA have long since strongly recommended that we all join together and protect the patients that we serve and ourselves by testing and treating our water lines. And the bloodborne pathogen standard, you'll find explicit directions on how to monitor and maintain the dental unit water line to keep the patient safe. This has been in there since 2003, right? These include flushing the lines at the start of the day, flushing between patients, monitoring, and treating the water. And all the alphabet of the agencies, every one of them, state to follow the IFUs, the manufacturer's instructions for use for your equipment and the products that are being used. So those IFUs are so important. There are currently 33 states that have taken a stand on dental unit waterline safety guidelines for testing and treating. There are 2 states that have mandated it into their Dental Practice Act, and that's Washington and now Georgia. And did you know that Arizona and Indiana have it written in their act, but it's only for mobile units in those states. And since the states are writing more direct instructions, this brings us to the new rule for Georgia. So the QR on the slide will take you to the ADA, and on that, there's a drop-down list that you can find a link to your state's Practice Act. If you haven't been there in a while, sometimes they're hard to find, right? So that QR code will take you there. So let's look at what happened recently in Georgia. The rule is brand new, and the state dental professionals, it'll take a little getting used to them too, right? This QR code will take you to the news article that was published about the thing. So here's what happened. Georgia took a stand, and they said we need to have some dental unit waterline program made available to our patients. So they have adopted the Washington State guideline. Okay, so that's what they did. They took Washington State. I mean, don't reinvent the wheel, people. Like, you use what's there, right? So they took Washington State and adopted that guideline. So here's what it says. This new rule follows the CDC guidelines, but it has stronger testing. Just like the other 33 states that follow the guidelines, the water leaving the handpieces and the air water syringes need to be less than 500 CFUs. But how do you know that you're meeting this requirement? And that is through testing. So here's where it differs from the CDC in Georgia and in Washington. Testing is mandated to be conducted quarterly and within 30 days of any repair. Then, if the test fails, you must have a remediation plan in place. This is the same that's in the CDC guidelines across the country. And then, in the documentation, isn't not a new requirement, but this part is. OSHA has mandated that records be kept for 3 years. Georgia is mandating for 5 years. So you have to keep your records for 5 years. And we'll talk about this again in a little bit later. Along with this new rule, you'll notice down at the bottom that there is new requirements for dental hygienists for a minimum of 2 hours of CE. So already in the state of Georgia, the hygienist takes 22 hours of CE, and now this is going to be an additional 2, so 24 hours every 2 years of CE for a hygienist. So going back to not recreating the wheel, there are lots of plans. Like this can be so confusing, especially if you're in a state or you're in an office, let's put it that way, that has not already been testing your water. You don't already have a plan in place. So I was doing some research, getting ready. And even though we've learned that the CDC has said it, the other states have said it, that doesn't mean that the dental offices know, right? The people who are in the trenches, they don't know this stuff. So if you start looking, you're going to find many examples out there that will help you get through the fine print. I wanted to share a great resource, and this is from Wisconsin. So Wisconsin has put this out with their Department of Health, and this example is really great. It's multi-pages. It lays it all out for you. The QR on the screen will also take you to this document. So I'm hoping that everybody is like bookmarking as you go. But it'll take you so you can read over it. But I want to bring you to one page that I thought that was one of the most valuables. It has an what to do. Like this is your toolkit of your water testing protocol, right? So this one is really good. It's easy to see. Now, the ADA got together with another expert in infection control, Hugh Freedy, and they came up with this Waterline infection control guideline. I really like this one too, and I use this as a basis for the information that I'm sharing with you tonight. So these are great resources. If you want to take it to a team meeting, you want to talk to your doctors, your team members about it, this is a really good handout because it doesn't spell out the exact time or how long to do things, but it spells everything that you're going to need. So this is the great way to start your plan, okay? All right, so now we know a little bit about why water safety is such a big deal, right? Let's talk about how to get that whole team involved. The first thing is we have to create awareness. So awareness is one of the hardest things that we have to do. And I was listening to a few podcasts getting ready for this lecture today, and I noticed that one of the things that all the experts have in common is that as an industry, we don't know what we don't know. I'm telling you, I should be under the OSHA jail right now for all the things that I didn't know in my career, right? And we don't like people to move our cheese. So we can be opposed to introducing something new into our already busy day. And so you get pushback with that, right? And I don't think it's not that we don't want to make sure our water is safe for our patients under our care. We just don't know how to do it. And the more important piece is how do we incorporate water safety into our busy day? We need to help everybody start thinking safe water every day. Just like oral recare and oral cancer screenings are part of our everyday language, the thought processes that we have, we need to have it create a team culture of this. Do you know that not only do we need to train our seasoned team members on this whole water testing thing, right? But do you know that there's not currently a really big data except from Danby, that there's a 38% DA turnover rate. So your dental assistants are leaving at a rate of 38%. So not only are our more seasoned DAs leaving the offices for other office, but our workforce is dropping. So that puts us to be even more overworked because now we have less people. The QR on the screen will take you to Danby's 2024 Dental Assisting Trends and Insights. And this is a really great news article to read through and find out about what's going on. And here's the deal. The doctors are hiring on-the-job training dental assistants because of the shortage that we have. And they're trying to train them up, right? So they're doing the best they can. But here's the kicker. We learn from each other. I told you a minute ago, I should be under the OSHA jail, right? When I was on a mentor visit a few years ago, I saw this new DA reach her bare hand into the ultrasonic. I just heard your all collective gasp. I can just see it now, like, oh my God, somebody did that, right? I told her it wasn't a safe thing to do. And she said, well, that's how their seasoned DA told her that it was okay. We don't know what we don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know. And ignorance is bliss, is what they say. And I don't watch the news because of this, because I need to have my life blissful. But even self education takes time, and the doctors and the admin are running around like crazy people. They're so busy running their practices, keeping tabs on the finances. They're dealing with personal issues and the doctors are spending their CE time on clinical topics that they need. And just adding compliance on top of all that is almost nearly impossible, right? And now I know that there's some that do, but they're the exception. They're not the rule. So I'm a training developer for Heartland Dental. We said that already. And in dealing with training challenges for the last 12 years, I'm trying to tell you, training is hard. It's a hard thing. And I remember back when I was starting out on my journey that I hired dental assistants to come in and help me. And I said, okay, here's the cotton rolls and here's the saliva ejectors and here's the doctor's schedule. If you have any problems, you come and get me. I was not a good trainer, right? Needless to say, they didn't stay there with me very long because they were overwhelmed and they didn't have training. So training takes an investment of time. Just like a doctor can't be expected to place a perfect implant without training, their DA can't be expected to know what they know without the same luxury, right? It takes time, it takes an investment. So I want you to think about that as we're going through the rest of the program today. Training takes time. I want to spend just a minute because part of that training is knowing what you're working with, right? And even when it comes to water, it's really even more important. So let's spend a quick second and talk about the differences between an open and a closed system. So an open system uses municipal water supply. That's the water that should be meeting the EPA standards by the time it hits your front door, right? Less than 500 CFUs. I think this is where a lot of people get hung up, though. I hear all the time that our city water is safe to drink and meets their standard. I was just telling Chandra before we started that we have an artesian well in my house. I should have perfect water, but it gets slimy in my cup, right? So I think that we think that it's coming in and that it's okay. But what they don't realize that it's not the water that's shooting out of the faucet. It's not the water that's going through our ice maker and our refrigerator. It's the water that's coming out of the air and water handpieces. It's the water that's coming out of our high speed and our contra angle, or not the contra angles, but they're coming out of our handpieces, right? Remember my little cup story, right? Enough said. Closed water systems use onboard bottles that are part of most dental chairs. Now I know we're finding that there's a lot of chairs that are not retrofitted. That don't have bottles, but for the most part, there's a lot that do. They just don't use them, right? So these can be easier to maintain because they already have the bottles on there. But both systems, no matter which, the water needs to be tested. Even in a closed water system, the lines get biofilm and it's really difficult to clean, right? So you need to identify what kind of systems that you have, and then you can get busy. So here are my 6 steps for any doctor, office manager, OSHA champion, they can use to set up their office. So the first one is you got to write it down. Part of the requirement is that you have a written plan, right? So you have to write it down. The first thing every doctor and office manager is to create a written SOP. How do you want your office to run? What are you going to do? It's kind of like having a systematic approach to managing your office's AR or how to follow the doctor's clinical guidelines, right? SOPs are crucial for the consistency and also accountability. So systems are not only how they effectively manage the people, but they give a consistent message because we learn from each other, right? So your SOP needs to follow OSHA guidelines, OSHA standards, and the CDC, and they need to be specific to your office. So you can get a template someplace, but you have to have it You have to have it so it's customized to your office. You have to have accountable items on there, actionable items. and a timeline of conduction. So that means that you have to contain assignments of responsibility and all of your plan. All of your SOPs should follow these same outlines, right? No matter what the rules. The next thing we need to do is we need to have team buy-in. I don't care what topic you're talking about. You're talking about compliance, you're talking about patient education, whatever. Everything needs to be a team sport. Compliance is one of the most important things that everybody has to be a part of, because just like having your sharps containers overfilled, right? People need to know these things need to be part of what they can do. And making sure that every department is following the guidelines are set by the alphabet of agencies. And these are confusing on a good day, let alone when you're trying to add another piece of this complex puzzle. I found that the very best way to ensure that everyone follows the rules is to tell them what they are, make sure they understand them and what their role is, and share the why. So it's kind of like if you tell your child they can't have a cookie and they keep bugging you, but if you tell them why, because we're going to have ice cream for dinner, then they're happy, right? That was probably not a great analogy, but you got my picture, right? So hosting a team meeting where everyone will sit down and read over your SOP together and have the opportunity to ask questions. This is the biggest part of it, right? And then in an open discussion, if you have a discussion and they talk about the implementation plan, you're going to get a higher buy-in for the plan because they made the plan together, right? The next thing is about the timeline. We talked about, remember the timeline that we have to write in our SOP. You have to schedule it to make it happen. If you don't schedule it, it's like a lot of us on this call today, we have a calendar, whether it's our office calendar or our scheduling that we use, whatever. It's my Outlook. If I don't make an appointment for it, it doesn't happen, right? So if we don't make an appointment and we end up blocking the schedule and doing those things, and then we'll put a patient in there, right? So make an event and block your practice management software so everyone has visibility, and then keep that appointment. Like, don't let anything interfere with it, because you need to bring the team. You need to bring it up at team meetings, and as the time gets closer, maybe in morning huddles to talk about it. In an ideal world where everything is working together, you get your water testing samples and stuff, you should be done in about 30 minutes. So having everybody on board is going to be paramount in making that time frame. The next thing you want to do is provide your training. I'm going to go backwards a little bit. It's provide your training. Your SOP spells it out, but that doesn't mean your team member knows how to do it, right? There are always so many technical questions around water testing. Holy cow, just the amount that you guys sent into this webinar today was crazy amounts of questions. And all the experts, we don't even know all the answers, right? So how can everybody know? My advice is to do some research, determine what system you want to follow. Most all the water companies provide education. There's all kinds, dentalcare.com, Viva Learning, all of them have some kind of education on their websites that you can find, right? Then here's the next thing you need to do. You need to have a qualified partner with a qualified trainer in your area. If you don't have anybody, then find you a trainer in your area. Your water companies have people that they can go out and it may not be an in-person meeting, but they will certainly have a virtual calls with you and look over them, right? Looking for a more DIY approach, that is not a problem. You just have to choose your products and then read those IFUs, research the company, right? And then the companies that you choose, they do have those trainings. And then next thing, you want to make sure you document your training always. That's an OSHA guideline, is to document your training records to keep them for 3 to 5 years. So anytime you have training on anything, you want to document that, and it goes depending on your state. I'll talk about that more in just a little bit. The next thing you want to do is training day. You want to testing day. I'm sorry. You want to divide and conquer. Remember, it's a team sport. I mentioned a minute ago, you should be able to get it all done in like less than 30 minutes. And you can't do that without everybody being involved. Everybody's got to lend a hand. Your OSHA or your infection control champion will be the one to ensure that the SOPs are followed, like the outline that the training, the product has. They'll make sure that everything's followed, and they'll do the documentation. And then that person is going to either run the in-office testing, or they're going to mail your samples to your water company. Either way. The final thing is we got to follow up. The follow-up process is one of the most vital parts of this plan here, right? So your first time, you're certainly going to run into a snag or two. Anytime you start something new, there's going to be hiccups, right? So I would advise that you host a team meeting after you've taken all your samples. So get everybody together and get their feedback on the process. Remember, we want this to be a team sport. Ask them for their ideas of how to improve gathering of the samples. And then make sure that you plan to incorporate any valid, actionable feedback. And when you do that, you're going to gain more buy-in for your team. And when your team is bought in, then they follow the system, right? All right, so now that you have a good plan in place for incorporating this complex task into your busy day, let's go through the steps to make it happen. So the first thing is the key principles are testing. So when you were designing your office SOP, you should have included your state guidelines. Like as an example, if you're in Washington or Georgia, you're going to say our testing needs to happen quarterly, right? Whatever that would be. But you got to write it down. The next part is the when and how, right? And this comes from your manufacturer's IFUs. You want to look at the IFUs because sometimes they have a specific guideline. As you'll notice, if you can see it, that the DentaSafe says, put it in the freezer, the whole kit before you even get started, right? So your IFUs will have some sort of guideline on there. Then you need to do some homework because there's different types of tests that are available and how they work may be slightly different. As an example, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back. As an example, there may be, there might be something that you failed to test, right? So you can do your in-office testing and everything. You can be read, or you can do those in an hour. And then I'm going to tell you personally, I'm a fan of using both because you can get a quick answer in that. But in the office test, you only get a pass or a fail. So using a mail-in test will provide you with the exact colonies, and we'll talk about that more in a minute. Again, you need to follow the instructions for your IFU and for whatever product you're using. Then the last part of this is you have a failed test. You need to have a remediation plan. This needs to be written in your SOP, right? Whatever you're going to do for your remediation plan. The next thing is shocking. Again, this is dependent on the equipment you use. Each manufacturer will have a different requirements, but all of them will say to use an EPA registered product. And I want to tell you that these are products that I have used in the past. Fast Check 15 and Stericyl R2A are both great products and they meet this requirement. All right, let's talk about maintenance. Again, you want to follow the IFU for whatever water, follow the IFU for as a water that you're going to use, right? As an example, manufacturers will give options for your IFUs, some to use tap water, bottled water, or softened water. All of these options require daily treatments, right? And once again, it depends on your equipment and your preferences. There are straw options, there are cartridge options that last for 12 to 18 months. And it's almost like it's an install it, forget it. Or if you choose the straw or cartridge, then make sure you follow the IFUs because shocking can damage them, right? So I'll talk about that again. But your other option is liquids or tabs that you add to fill each bottle. Now, these have the human effect of forgetting to add them during the busy day, but they are very cost effective. The last part of the rule is about flushing. This is not new. It has been part of the CDC guidelines for a long time, but there seems to be confusion around flushing and purging, right? Flushing is simply running the water for the designated amount for each line, right? And then purging is removing the water. So purging is you want to get all the water air out of there and leave it with air. The CDC recommends flushing at the start of the day for 2 minutes and then 20 to 30 seconds between each patient. And additionally, the ADA recommends that all lines are purged at the end of the day to get as much water out as possible. This helps to minimize the amount of biofilm overnight. This will depend on what products you use too, right? Because even though this manufacturer says purge the lines, there are some products that say you need to not purge the line, such as with the Stericyl straw, right? You don't want to purge the line or purge the lines on that one. When I was doing this research, I even found that it's written into the manufacturer's instructions for this is a handpiece flush, but do you see right here? Oh, you can't see right here. 20 to 30 seconds to prevent cross contaminations. I'm going to tell you, I've been a dental assistant for over half my life. People don't do that. They don't understand the need for it, and they just don't do it because they're busy. The other thing I found, I thought this was quite interesting, is I was on one of those IFUs and it said, don't even use latex gloves to clean or do anything for their equipment. Something about the latex causes it to discolor. I never knew that, but look what I learned when I read an IFU, right? So I can't say enough. Follow the IFUs for your products. They will guide you through everything, the entire process, and they have the resources that you need, right? IFUs. Say 25 times. If you're writing any note, write that down. Follow IFUs. Even though the manufacturers have written the guidelines to the care for their equipment, let's face it, has anyone other than the installer ever read the IFU, right? I think not. There isn't a published study that I could find, but I did a quick Google AI search the other day, and I found that there's only about 30% estimated of dental offices in the US that are following these guidelines and already testing your water, right? Even for the states that have mandated testing, the word just hasn't made it all the way to the individual office. They don't know what they don't know. So it's up to us to keep spreading the word about this potentially life-saving procedure. We don't want it to be on our patients that have it a problem, or even our team members. So what lines need to be tested? All of them, right? All of the lines need to be tested. I've even seen questions about the self-contained or the mobile cavitrons. Yes, they need to be tested, right? Because they have small little lines inside. They need to be tested. Everything has to be. So there's all kinds of testing options out there, many options that you can choose from. Main thing, do your research and choose a company to partner with and look through the products that they have, right? But also that chair manufacturer's IFUs. I'm going to keep saying that. There are silver, there's iodine treatments to choose from. You just want to choose what works best for you and your equipment. And once you've chosen a trusted water partner, they're very familiar with the different chair manufacturers too. If you can't find your IFU, I'll give you my email address at the end. I'll help you find it, right? But our friends at Solmetics are here and they are experts. They really can help you to do that. So let's talk a little bit about testing options, right? Because there's different options that you can do. I'm a huge fan of the mail-in options. And the reason why is because one, they have instructions for use. This is with every product you're going to get. So that's across the board. But here's the kicker. With a mail-in option, you're going to get tested to the exact amount. You're going to get the exact amount of biofilm bacteria that's in your water. The second thing about them is that a third party reporting, like you're going to get a report back that's going to come via email, their website, fax, mail, whatever. They're going to send you a report. This, my friends, is valuable because there's a documentation requirement. Remember, you got to have that. And two, there's always trained customer service to help. And that comes with the mail-in and the in-office ones too. But here's the bad part about it, the disadvantages. You may have to wait up to a week or more to get your results back. So you've tested and then you've gone about your busy day because, I don't know, you ran your test on Tuesday. You got to get through the rest of the week and then the following week to beginning to get your test back. Also, there's time sensitive to ship your samples. I know that we're not supposed to send them on Friday or even late Thursday afternoon because they get through the UPS and they stay in the UPS truck all weekend, right? So that can make a difference. So there's time sensitive. With the in-office options, I like these too, right? So the instructions for use are there, but here's the good part. They can be read in under an hour. And there's customer service to help you. Here's the disadvantages for the in-office. I like that it's quick, but it has a human factor. So let's say that I'm in my busy day. It's my day to test my water. Everybody brings me theirs and it sits on the counter. And then I get 4 patients back to back. So my water is still sitting around waiting, right? So it's got to be it's time for that bacteria to get into the water. And then documentation is such a challenge. We can't get people to write down when the autoclave was ran, right? So documentation is a huge factor, and it takes a person to actually physically do it, right? So those are the advantages and the disadvantages of the in-office testing. Let's talk about a quick second and talk about shocking. Like we've got our testing, but we have to shock and then test, or do we test and then shock, right? What is the deal with that? Remember when I said that having the exact amount, that exact count was so important? If you shock first, then not only do you not get those exact amounts, but you have no way to judge if your maintenance products are as effective as they need. So testing first is the best way to get started. And this goes across all of my buddies in compliance. They said test first, right? So when you test first, you know if the lines need a little extra love and care. As an example, if you're using a testing as an in-office and you pass, yay, then you're most likely good to go. Give it a good shocking treatment and then be on with your maintenance product. But what if you don't know, right? Another advantage of using the testing before treating is that if you've not been testing your water or you've been using city water, the mail-in testing, remember, only shows above 500, only tests positive for above 500, right? So you may be at a high number, right? You may be at 499. And if that's the case, you may need to bring out the big guns. Or if your count comes back and it's too numerous to count, there's just so much bacteria, then a line cleaner is really what you need to do, right? A line cleaner, you have a higher chance of destroying the biofilm early. And most often you'll not need to keep repeating your shocking protocol over and over again till you get a passing test. Now, a line cleaner may seem like an extra step in the beginning, but I promise you it will pay off in the long run. But here's the deal. You have to test before you know if the line cleaner is needed, right? So let's talk about shocking. There's all kinds of different ideas about shocking, right? And how often do you need to shock is the biggest question ever. I had a class yesterday and I asked in the chat, how often are you shocking? I was amazed. The responses were crazy. One office is shocking every week. The other ones were like, oh, we just do it once a year. But here's the deal. You need to know, you need to throw in your state, your CDC guidelines to that to know what you're going to do. As an example, in that resource I gave you for Wisconsin earlier, they say shocking should become monthly until you have 2 to 3 sequential pass results. That's really across the board, right? That's kind of the CDC. They don't actually say that. I don't want to say that's a CDC standard, but it's a recommendation, if you will. So another decision you're going to need to make is what type of shock. Do you need silver ion? Do you need a silver ion? Do you need an iodine or even bleach? And those chair manufacturers, IFUs, a couple of the manufacturers give directions for a solution of bleach that you can shock with. But I want to tell you, you can only leave bleach for 10 to 15 minutes. So think about this. That's how long it needs to stay. So, and leaving it in there can damage your equipment. So I'm in the middle of my day, I'm shocking, and then I get an extra patient put in. So now my bleach may stay in longer. I run damaging my equipment if I do that. And then I know from personal experience, when you put bleach in there, it takes a lot longer to flush it through because it has that smell, right? And your patients can smell that. So it takes more rinsing. I would recommend that Citruscell has a really great, Citruscell is a great product, I'm going to say. You leave it in for 24 hours. You can leave it overnight, come in the morning and start purging, right? So it's a really, really good product. It doesn't harm any equipment or anything like that. So I would use a word of caution, and we're going to talk about maintenance in just a few minutes. But if you're using a Stericycle straw, any other company's straw for maintenance product, then you got to make sure that you take the straw out, because any shock, I don't care if it's Citruscell, if it's bleach, if it's another company, it doesn't matter. It will harm your straw. So you want to take that out and then make sure that you use a dummy straw. And the dummy straw is like a hollow plastic tubing, And I've seen them in gray and pink, and they're extra long, go in the bottle, and it will suck up all your stuff. So, okay, now we know what to do for shocking, but here's how you're going to put it into your busy day. Once again, we're going to train everybody in the office to do this, right? So, gathering the samples is really quite easy. First thing you're going to do is gather your supplies and assign your team members, right? Remember, you want to get it done in 30 minutes. You need friends. You want to get an equal amount of water from each line. And you may or may not know this, but I got to tell you, see that little flush valve that's underneath there? I had no idea what it did. No idea, because we didn't get water samples. So I'm like, we're turning it back and forth, trying to regulate the water. No idea. So those flush valves are on all the equipment that I've ever seen. They have this flush valve. So you got to turn the flush valve off. Some of them you have to hold it in place to get your sample. But if you don't, then you're taking a shower in all the water that you're trying to put into your little vial, right, to collect. So make sure that you've done that or you've got a good bath out of the deal. Now that you have all of your water done, it's time to run your test by the end of the day. So most of the supply samples say that you want to keep your supplies cold. And so go ahead and stash it in the freezer before you get ready for that. And that'll freeze the little packets that are in there. And I said earlier about Wednesday or Thursday is not the best time to gather your water. I'm sorry, Thursday or Friday is not the best time because they don't normally stay in that UPS truck, right? And then this delay, like I said, can make you go into more water. So I said more things earlier than I meant to. There you go. So let's talk about maintenance. There are many options for maintenance. Once again, there's straws, there's tablets, there's liquids, right? And here's the deal. The daily treatment options have that human factor again. Those dusky humans, right? So think about it. You're in a super busy and you're in the middle of a crown prep or an SRP and your bottle runs out of water. I'm going to say that happened to me a lot, right? This happened to my husband last week. He was in for his dental appointment and she got down to the final rinse from his prophy and there was no water, right? So it's just an inconvenience that happens. But my doctor and my patient are both waiting. So I had to get up and run and unscrew the bottle, take it back into the lab and get some more water. And then while I'm in there, my little box of tabs was empty. So I think, okay, I'll get it next time. But then the rest of the day, I stay so busy. Like I may not have gone back to that operatory for another 2 hours. I forgot that I didn't put the water treatment in there, right? So now, will one treatment wreck the entire system? Probably not. But this is how those habits, those little mishaps become a habit. So one of the easiest ways to take the human factor out is to use a continuous use product, such as a SteriStraw. And I'm going to tell you, I've been a fan of this product for a long time because it is like a once and done, right? And I love that it uses a silver ion technology, which is 20 times more effective. And guess what I just learned the other day too, right? When you install the straw, you kind of get like an auto shock when you put it into use. So it goes in there and it makes it so that it's easy to use and you get that little extra boost of almost a shocking when it comes into there. It's really cool, right? So our friends at Solmedics have put together this whole Sterisil safe water solution protocol. This is the same kind that we saw earlier, but you're going to have a monthly fast check that you can check just to make sure you have any problems, especially on those operatories that may not be used as much. You want to do a quarterly with your mail-in. It's a recommendation for quarterly. And then annually, you want to swap out your straws if you're using the straws. And in the middle, shock with that Citracil because it's one of those products that you don't have to worry about harming your equipment. Okay, so this is a really good solution that they put together for us to follow. But whatever one you choose, you just follow the directions. Okay. Have you ever thought about the boil water advisories? So I guess it was in the middle of December, there was a boil water advisory in Baltimore, and my email was blowing up. They're like, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do, right? Because It wasn't the question of do we need to be having our bottles or anything. They just didn't know what kind of water to use because they had been using tap water. Their equipment says putting tap water. So they were a little confused about, okay, we've always used tap water, now what we do. So a lot of us don't know. Like if we're using a closed system, they do need to worry about those boil water alerts, right? And so do you and that tap water could be a problem. So think about your municipal water. Its job is to come to your building and be coming out of your faucet, I bet, well, not really out of your faucet, but to your building at less than 500 CFUs. Most of the time, the boil water advisory will only last for a couple of days, maybe some of them even one day. But I want you to think about this. By the time that you hear on the news that the boil water has been lifted, how long do you think it takes to empty the water, like the pipes coming from the municipal water plant, all the way to your office? Could be a hot little minute. You know what I mean? It really could. So you want to think about how long that is. And then after we hear on the news, hey, the boil waters advisory is lifted. So we go back to business as usual. But that water is still not only in the pipe outside my office, now it's in all the plumbing inside my office, in my building. If you're in a high-rise building, can you all imagine how much water there is in those pipes going up to the fourth floor? You know what I mean? So it takes a lot of water there, and it's going to take a hot minute to clear it. That's a lot of purging, my friends. A lot of flushing. I'm sorry. It's got a lot of flushing. So the boil water advisor can affect you, and I want you to think about that. It's always been a good idea to have a supply your drinking water, or if your unit states distilled water, whatever they have to have on hand, but have you a stock of that for those boil water advisories because they happen all the time. I live in Florida; they happen constantly, right? So you want to make sure that you have some water. So let's talk about documentation. This is another of those pesky human factors, right? I want you to make sure that when, once again, your SOP, you have to have a written plan. The CDC recommends that you have a plan. Someone be appointed the champion or the coordinator, and it contains all those details of who, what, when, and where. Make sure there's a timeline of when and how often to test. Your documentation also contains your testing logs. Like logs are part of the big deal when the inspectors come in. They're going to look for your SOP and they're going to look for your logs, right? So our friends at Solmedics have a great couple of logs for the Fast Check 15 and one for the R2A test that you can download and use right on their site. And don't forget to bookmark that. I'm going to give it to you in a minute. But the logs need to contain, if you want to make your own, that's good too, right? But they have to contain the date, the time, the tester, the water source, like what kind of water you're using in your products, the product used, and then how the samples were collected, whether they were pooled or they were individual lines. Finally, the last piece of documentation are those test results. I found out last week that even though the state dental boards are telling the people to follow the CDC guidelines, there was inspectors in North Carolina, Colorado, and Maryland who follow CDC guidelines. But the inspectors are asking to see these logs, right? And that just happened. Compliance people told me last week, right? And these inspectors, they talk to each other. They spread the word around. So we better be ready. We better get ourselves ready and stay that way. The final part of this is you need to keep all your documentation for 3 to 5 years. OSHA states 3, but look at Georgia and Washington. They're amping that up to 5 years, right? So go by whatever your state says is how long to keep it. Now I want to give you a word of caution. And we tend to say, oh, I'm going to take all of those plans out of my binders. I'm going to toss them in the trash. But you should not do that. OSHA also mandates that your old plans and logs be archived. So you need to archive them. And I have never seen a time where it says you can archive them for 10 years or nothing like that. It's like forever and always pretty much, right? So hopefully your plans won't change that often. But that's kind of where our friends at Stericyl they've got this solutions center that you can go into there. And in the My Solutions Center, you can find all the resources you need. But more importantly, they're going to help you with these testing logs. They can catalog them for you. They can be in there. And I don't know, but I love when I know people's got my back, right? Because dental unit water lines is a whole beast in itself, even above all the other compliance things we need to do. So having them in your back pocket will really be helpful. So I want to leave you with these couple of things, right? Three things. Remember to monitor the levels of bacteria growth in your lines. You can only do that through testing. Then you want to have an effective maintenance, and you choose products that you know are going to destroy the bacteria and the biofilm, and then keep them that way, right? Maintenance is the most important. And then by staying compliant, not only will you keep your patients safe, but your team members too from inhaling that pesky overspray. I want to thank you, and I want to leave you with my resources here. So, like I said, I did a lot of research when I was doing this, but these are the three are the biggest things that will help you. If you're not familiar with the CDC Summary of Infection Prevention Practices in Dental Settings, I would so advise you, please get that QR code and bookmark that site, print it out for your team because it spells out everything. Sterilization guidelines have 2 pages in this small little document. And I thought it was really great that the CDC and OSHA partnered together to release this back in, I want to say 2016, I think, somewhere around in there was the date. And it's made it so much easier for us to follow. The other QR code in the middle is to the ADA, Dental Unit Waterline Infection Control Program. That's part of that. That's that flyer I showed you earlier. And then the last one also takes you to the ADA for your state dental boards. So you just click on that. It'll take you to a page. You can scroll through. I know that they're alphabetical order because I was squeezing through them earlier and you can see those, right? So keep those things. Keep yourself compliant. And if you have trouble researching anything, you need your equipment IFUs or anything like that, my email address is on the screen. You can email me, you can call me, you can send me a smoke signal, whatever it is, and I'll be happy to help you research. So I want to thanks Solmedics and my buddy Shander for asking me tonight to spend some time with you. And so I don't know, Shander, let's get some questions going on.
Oh, wow. Cherie, that was awesome. That was such a great presentation. So insightful. Gosh, I know I learned something new and helpful, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. So wonderful.
I hope
Wonderful.
so.
And I just love those QR codes because they offer such a quick access to important resources, and we know how important that is for everybody to have those on hand. So thanks for including those as well.
You are so welcome. Most people are Googlers like me, right? We want to know.
Definitely. Well, just like our last webinar, we have received a lot of questions. So keep sending your questions through the chat, the question chat with the little question mark, and make sure you're really precise with what you're asking so we can correctly answer them for you. I promise we'll get to as many as we can here, but we may have a water specialist contact you or send you your answers via email. So you'll also want to stay on just real quick after our Q&A because we have a special offer for you. So let's get started with Q&A. So Cherie.
Okay, I hope I know the answer.
I bet you do. What is the best way to document and store your test reports and logs?
Oh my goodness. I just said that too, right?
Yeah.
So you can store them in a digital fashion. OSHA says digital is great, right? Or you can store paper. I'm a very lover of paper myself, but both Fast Check 15 and Stericycle R2A, they have documentation options right there, right? Those test logs and everything that I have. But I will tell you that when the inspectors are coming in, they have a nose for the person who doesn't know where your documentation is stored. So make sure everybody knows where it's at. And I don't know. I'm just a fan of paper. I just think it's the easiest way to do because what if they come in and the electricity's out, right? They're going to still say, I want to see your logs.
Right. They're still going to want to have those. And I know we have a My Solution Center too with Solmedics. You can keep them there indefinitely. So it's always nice to have them. But I do agree, sometimes having those downloaded reports in the binders is just super handy, right?
It is. It
I
is.
also saw what was it, Colorado, North Carolina, Maryland, they follow the CDC guidelines for testing and maintenance. And what is it? They have inspectors now that are asking for those test logs, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I just found out this week that those 3 states have had people come in and ask for them. So get ready, people. It's coming.
have them ready. Documentation. All right, so thanks for walking through just how simple it can be, and we appreciate that update on the 3 states as well. So next question is, how often does the state of Minnesota require dental unit water lines to be tested?
Ooh, I'm going to have to dig deep for this, but I believe that Minnesota is one of those following CDC guidelines, right? And it just says to test. It doesn't say how often. Like, come on, give us a timeline. We want to know like the exact thing, right? But it
Right.
doesn't. So the Association for Dental Safety, the ADS, they recommend quarterly testing, and then now Washington and now Georgia are requiring quarterly testing too. So I would have to
Mhm.
say we would recommend that, but you decide whatever your manufacturer's protocol is for your equipment. They will sometimes have it in there, but you just decide what works for you, your practice, and your equipment, right? Quarterly
Excellent.
or 6 months, whatever.
Right, right. Well, you know a lot about state regulations, so thanks for helping out our Minnesota people.
You're
I'm sure.
welcome.
We have a really good question that came in. Do you always have to remove the Stericyl straw to perform shock? And if you don't mind,
Absolutely.
the Stericyl straw you can actually keep in only though if you're using citrusol shock, and you could shock right through it. No dummy straw needed. But yes, for the other straws, you would have to remove it for shocking.
Well, look at what I just learned. I thought you had to take it out.
That's one really good thing about the straw. It's so
It
nice
is.
when you use citrusol shock. You just shock right through it, leave it in. You never have to take it out. So really good piece of
I
information.
didn't. I was misinformed. I did not know that. So look at what I learned. I love it that you can learn something new every single day. Isn't that great?
Agreed, agreed. Same here. All right, well, let's do another one here. It's about testing. Do we need to test the water on the ultrasonic when we change the water every day? Now, I know you touched on ultrasonics earlier, so what about changing the water?
I'm hoping that they're asking about their ultrasonic scaler, like their Cavitrons. I know that's a
Mm,
brand, but yes, the answer is yes, right? Because remember, it's not your water. It's what's lurking around in those tiny little lines. And biofilm is the most common reason for water failure, right? It sticks to the inside of the water lines, harboring bacteria.
mm.
So yes, 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 and yes.
Yep, right. It's not your water, it's your water lines. And that biofilm just loves to coat the inside of those little tiny water lines.
It
It's
does.
such a difficult thing to remove, and that's all our biggest problem, right? Biofilm.
It is.
Okay. Well, next question is, do we have to test each water line separately? Now, I know we're going to test them all, but do we need to test them separately?
Well, I'm going to say overreaching, no, right? We can do pooled samples. So I talked about that a little while ago. You get an equal amount from each line in your operatory. Maybe I didn't say all those words. I do apologize. But you want to get an equal amount from all the things, right? Now, the only time you would need to use a single line is if you fail a test. Like if the operatory fails, then you're going to need to identify which line within the operatory it's going to be. And 9 times out of 10, it's the line from your slow speed handpiece, right? Because the water sits in those lines and it doesn't go. But that would be the only time. So start off with a pooled sample. And then if you get a failing test, then go back and test each line in that operatory.
Right, right. And I know it's so important, right? Testing with a pooled sample, you want the same operatory together, equal amounts of
Yeah.
water for each line, right?
Yes.
Very good. All right. Well, looks like we have just a few minutes left, so let's answer another one. See if we can get through a couple more. Do we still need to shock the lines even if we get a negative test? Meaning they negative
Absolutely.
bacteria.
Right? Absolutely. So here's the deal. Shocking will keep your line, like make sure it's clean, right? And the ADS recommends that shocking at routine intervals, which is quarterly or every 6 months, right? But this will help to ensure your products that are they should be doing their job, but just in case there's some extra, right? This will make
Yes.
them work as effectively as you need them to be. So
Right, right.
yes,
That makes sense. Well, I was at ADS's boot camp last week and learned a lot about infection control. And oddly, that was one of the top questions, asking when people shock and if it was just for remediation. So Thanks for answering
right?
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's just to make sure everything is clean and working well.
exactly, exactly. All right, I think we have time for one more because I have a few things to share with us at the end here, but let's see here. Do we still need to test quarterly if we are treating our water with a straw or a tablet?
Yes, because how do you know your products are working, right?
That's
You
right.
don't know they're working or not working unless you're testing.
Agreed.
That was a
Agreed.
short answer for that one. I'm so
I
proud of
know.
myself.
But it makes sense, right? I mean, if you're using treatment, sometimes people think that the treatment alone can handle it, but biofilm is just very evasive and it tends
Yes,
to coat those lines so well. So, yep, the only way to know is to test, right? Water can look
that
even
is
really good. Boy, we tested some toilet water once against like dental water lines, and the toilet water passed. So think about that. It looks clear and great, but not always what it seems to be.
not what it seems to be. That is so true. That is so true.
All right. Well, those were all great questions. And again, thank you for being so engaged in the question chat. We have come to the end of our session. But if we didn't get to your question, do not worry. We will make sure we answer them via email, and you're welcome to contact one of our water specialists anytime. You can get answers, help with protocol, and put the Stericyl Safe Water solution to work in your practice. I promised a special offer for everyone who attended. So if you can reveal that slide there, we'd like to sample everyone, give everyone a free sample of Fast Check 15. So try it on us, see how simple it is to test, and please watch for that offer. It'll come to your email address that you registered with. Cherie, do you have any last comments or advice for our audience?
I do. Get your stuff, get your act together, keep it that way, and bring friends to make it happen.
Perfect. Perfect. Wonderful words. Well, this was a great session. And if I just wanted to point out, if you're attending Chicago Midwinter next week, please stop by the Sometics booth, which is number 1225. We have RDH Michelle Strange, who was with us last week on the last webinar, and DA Tia Hunter presenting on the hour from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Thursday and Friday. And it's a great opportunity just to come and ask some questions from our people, take advantage of our exciting show specials, and those will include Sometics, Stericyl, and DrawShield products. So lots of good things happening next week. And again, thank you, Cherie, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Before you go, we'd love to hear what you thought about this presentation. So there's just two short questions, a little survey. Let's show Cherie some love because I think she did an awesome job, and I'd love to just give her some hand claps and applaud her. Thank you so much. I'm Shanda Chatham. Thank you for all for joining us to pursue a safer practice with Stericyl Safe Water Solution. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.